In the final installment, Jackie writes about the future of mental health and efforts the league is making to erase the stigma associated with seeking help. One part in particular struck me, guys, is when Jackie writes about how players are open to helping other players, but, quote, here's who it won't be: the former All-Star whose mental health struggles remain unchecked and untreated. His agent frets about his client, has begged him to get help, but the player declines, saying he can't bring himself to see himself as a vulnerable person, the agent explains, because it doesn't match up with the invincibility of the player that he once was. I don't care who it is, but just in general, that feeling of a generation of guys that still aren't open. Jemele, how do you react to that?
This is an especially tough battle for all professional athletes because there is this mythology we build around them. We do look at them as invincible, and as people who don't have vulnerabilities. And so a lot of times they're playing to a persona and they're afraid to seek help, which puts them in a particularly grueling kind of prison. And then if you add on top of that, if they're a man of color, because in this society, especially being a black man in particular, there's no safe space. There's no way you can be vulnerable without facing some level of scrutiny or attack. And so you add all those factors, and it just is really heartbreaking to see. That's why I'm so glad that so many players are now openly voicing the fact that they struggle with certain things. People in this country feel like if you have money, if you have fame, you have everything figured out. And a lot of times those things bring on more problems and more trauma and more tragedy than most people can possibly fathom or deal with.
Yeah, and I think in particular with this too, what stands out to me is the idea that even if you start out and you're in a good mental place to begin with, it doesn't mean that it's like that and it's static forever. People think about, we talk about Vince Carter and the arc of his career and how superstar and then kind of morphs into a role player, and now like the wily veteran at the end of the bench. You go through different phases of your career. Life works that way too. And, you know, you could be earning a certain amount. You could be the star player. Social media has kind of come and, you know, and at some point maybe it'll go. But it totally changes the scope of what these players are facing or what they're having to hear on a day-to-day basis. And it's just totally different than what we've seen before.
And you still don't know if there's, you know, there's going to be players out there that are going to look at it as a sign of weakness. I'm not going to go seek help because, you know, that's not what I'm supposed to be doing. But now you do have guys like Kevin Love, DeMar DeRozan come out. But you and I, we talked about this before. What about the player that's kind of like at the end of the roster? Right. Is he going to be the guy that's going to be public that he needs help? Because then he might think that the organization is going to say, you know what, when push comes to shove, it's our last, you know, $500,000. We're going to spend it on you or somebody else.
Right. The idea is that there's a security in being an elite player, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And that, you know, that's a risk that you take. It's not unlike what happened with Jason Collins, right? For him to come out of the closet as a fringe NBA player, that's much harder because he was basically jeopardizing his ability to get hired in this league again. So that's definitely pretty interesting. Also in that piece, incoming rookie Trae Young said, quote, "I've tuned out of social media because that's a place that can really bring you down." Frank, you like Young's approach as he enters the league, thinking about a guy who basically, this is the social media generation. They don't remember a life without it. So do you like the idea of him kind of just disconnecting?
Yeah, I think it's got to be a lot harder today for the rookies coming in because every game that they play, I mean, poor Trae Young is playing summer league games. And if he has a poor first summer league game, it's basically a referendum on how he is as a player and that he was a bust as a draft pick. It's ridiculous. I think he's doing the right thing, but when they go to rookie orientation, the league and the union, they do a very good job kind of explaining to the players the way to go about, especially that first year, where you can't let all this criticism. It's going to bother everybody, but I think he's doing a smart thing because he's going to be as scrutinized as any rookie.
Jemele, I want to ask you, because I don't know, are you familiar with getting a lot of negative reactions?
Not me, not at all. I don't know what you're talking about.
What do you think of that strategy, though, the idea of that going from I'm in there and then I'm not in there at all, I'm deleting my apps, I'm just off of it?
Well, it takes a lot of discipline to do that because I consider myself more of a technology immigrant. I think we all are. It was something we had to learn. We were already fully grown adults when it happened. Since Twitter's existence, I've been at ESPN, so I didn't have to worry about somebody digging up tweets when I was 16, 15, and saying stupid stuff. But they've always been on it. And social media for them is the street corner. It's the place where they gather. So it's a much harder disconnect for them. And as a result, and I run into younger journalists, especially female journalists who talk to me about this, they take it much more seriously because of how they've grown up with it.
Right.
To us, it seems so crazy. Like, why would you take somebody seriously who has like 10 followers, who you don't know, some eggless avatar, or even people who do have avatars? We can do that because we're adults. We haven't grown up with it. It's much harder for them to do it. So I applaud that he already is exhibiting this kind of discipline and maturity.